Assalamu alaikum dear students. Today we are going to discuss misplaced and dangling modifiers. Misplaced modifiers. A misplaced modifier is a word, phrase or clause that is improperly separated from the word it modifies or describes. Because of this separation, sentences with this error often sound awkward, ridiculous, or confusing. Furthermore, they can be downright illogical. Dear student, a misplaced modifier is a type of ambiguous grammatical construct whereby a grammatical modifier could be as being associated with the word other than the one intended. A dangling modifier, also known as a hanging modifier, is one that has no subject at all and is usually a practice. It is also called illogical participle. For example, a writer may have meant to modify the subject, but word order used means that he modifier appears to modify an object instead. Such ambiguous can lead to unintentional humor or informal context difficulty in comprehension. Similarly, in the sentence "at the edge of night," for example, we have an example: on her way home, Jan found a gold man's watch. This is gold is here misplaced modifier. So the example above suggests that a gold man owns a watch. Misplaced modifier can usually be corrected by moving the modifier to a more sensible place in the sentence, generally next to the word it modifies. Before we will go for correction, I'll repeat again the example. On her way home, Jan found a gold man's watch. So now the example is here. Now it's the watch that is gold. Now look at the example again. Correctly placed modifier is here. On her way home, Jan found a man's gold watch. Now the sense is very clear. You have look here again. On her way home, Jan found a gold man's watch. Now the arrow is telling that gold is misplaced modifier. But here in this example, on her way home, Jan found a man's gold watch. Now correctly placed modifier. There are several kinds of misplaced modifier. Number one is misplaced objective. Misplaced adjectives are incorrectly separated from the nouns that modify and almost always distort the intended meaning. Now look at the example 1. The child ate a cold dish of cereal for breakfast this morning. Now misplaced adjective is modifies dish. So correct the error by placing the adjective next to the noun it modifies. Corrected one is here. The child ate a dish of cold cereal for breakfast this morning. Now correctly placed adjective modifies. Example 2 is here. The torn student's book lay on the desk. Now you can see misplaced adjective modifies student. Corrected one is here. The student's torn book lay on the desk. Correctly placed adjective is here. You can see this example and that example. The torn student's book lay on the desk. Now the student's torn book lay on the desk. Now the sense is very, very clear. Sentences like these are common in everyday speech or ordinarily cause their listeners no trouble. However, they are quite imprecise and therefore should have no place in your writing. Placement of adverbs can also be change the meaning in sentence. Now that's very important, that how you place the adverbs. For example, the sentences below illustrate how the placement of just can change the sentence meaning. Now look at the example. Just means only John was picked, no one else. Now this is the example. Just John was picked to host the program. Just, I am repeating again, just John was picked to host the program. Now just means that John was picked now. Now look at the example. John was just picked to host the program. Now you can see the difference, that how we have corrected that one. Just John was picked to host the program, but now John was just picked to host the program. For this, placement of adverbs are very important in the sentence meaning. Just means that John hosted only the program, nothing else. Now look at the John was picked to host just the program. This is now another condition. Each of these sentences says something logical but quite different, and its correctness depends upon what the writer has in mind. Often misplacing an adverb not only alters the intended meaning but also creates a sentence whose meaning is highly unlikely or completely ridiculous. This sentence, for example, suggests that we brought a lunch slowly. So now we ate the lunch that we had brought slowly. Now you can see to repair the meaning, move the adverb slowly so that it is near it. So now look at the example. We slowly ate the lunch that we had brought. Watch out for adverbs such as only, just, nearly, merely, and almost. They are often misplaced and cause an unintended meaning. This sentence, for example, means that I only contributed the money. Now look at the example. I only contributed $10 to found the orphan children. Now repaired, how the sentence means that I contributed only $10. I contributed only $10 to fund for the orphan child. So like adjectives, adverbs are commonly misplaced in everyday speech and may not cause listeners difficulty. However, such sentences are quite emphasized and therefore should have no place in your writing. So now misplaced phrases may cause a sentence to sound awkward and may create a meaning that does not make sense. The problem sentences below contain misplaced phrases that modify the wrong nouns. To fix the errors and clarify the meaning, put the phrases next to the noun they are supposed to modify. Example number 1, a buyer with leather seat. The dealer sold the Cadillac to the buyer with leather seats. Now corrected one you have to look at here. The dealer sold the Cadillac with leather seat to the buyer. Now you may look the example number 1 and corrected one. Now the difference is here. The dealer sold the Cadillac to the buyer with leather seats. Now the corrected one is here. The dealer sold the what he sold. Now you have to tell the Cadillac with leather seats to the buyer. Example number 2, a corner smoking pipes. The 3 bankers talked quietly in the corner smoking pipes. Corrected one, the 3 bankers smoking pipes talked quietly in the corner. Example number 3 is here, a house made of barbed wire. They saw a fence behind the house made of barbed wire. So now the look at here the corrected one. They saw a fence made of barbed wire behind the house. So now look at the example number 3 and the corrected one is there. They saw a fence behind the house made of barbed wire. So now look at here the corrected one. They saw a fence made of barbed wire behind the house. Now we'll see the misplaced clauses. Misplaced clauses may cause a sentence to sound awkward and may create a meaning that doesn't make sense. The problem sentences below contain misplaced clauses that modify the wrong nouns. To fix the errors and clarify the meaning, put the clauses next to the noun they are supposed to modify. This is very compulsory and important for your sentences, that misplaced clauses. The problem of sentences below contains misplaced clauses that modify the wrong nouns. To fix the errors and clarify the meaning, put the clauses next to the noun they are supposed to modify. Example number 1 is here: a buttered woman. The waiter served a dinner roll to the woman that was well buttered. So corrected is here: the waiter served a dinner roll that was well buttered to the woman. Now the example number 1 and corrected one you have to look at here again. The waiter served a dinner roll to the woman that was well buttered. Now the corrected one is telling something else. The waiter served a dinner roll that was well buttered to the woman. So example number 2, a hamper that Rolf wore. Rolf piled all of his clothes in the hamper that he had worn. So now the corrected one is here: Rolf piled all of his clothes that he had worn in the hamper. So now the sense is very clear in the corrected one. So dear students, you should be very careful in these things. Be careful in correcting a misplaced modifier. Do not create a sentence with two possible meanings. This is the thing you have to be very careful for that. So example is here: the teacher said on Monday she would return our essays. Now look at the example again. The teacher said on Monday she would return our essays. So problem: did the teacher say this on Monday, or will she return the essays on Monday? The correction number 1, meaning the essays will be returned on Monday. The teacher said she would return our essays on Monday. Correction number 2 is here: meaning that the teacher spoke on Monday. On Monday, the teacher said she would return our essays. So now look at here again. The teacher said on Monday she would return our essays. Correction number 1 is saying the teacher said she would return our essays on Monday. But correction number 2 is saying on Monday the teacher said she would return our essays. Now the three senses are here. So you should be very careful in these things while dealing these you can say while dealing these things in your sentences. So now a dangling modifiers. A dangling modifiers is a phrase or clause that is not clearly and logically related to the word or word it modifies. For example, is placed next to, so we'll see the example 2, but two notes about dangling modifiers. So as an adjective, a modifier clause is normally at the beginning or at the end of a sentence and usually attached to the subject of the main clause. So as you can say, walking down the street, the man saw the beautiful trees. Now walking down the street, here street is clause, the man is subject, saw the beautiful trees, the trees are here object. However, when the subject is missing or the clause attaches itself to another object in a sentence, the clause is seemingly hanging on nothing or on an entirely inappropriate noun. It thus dangles as in these sentences. In the first sentence, as I have discussed, the The adjunct clause may at the first appear to modify the trees, the subject of the sentence. However, it actually modifies the speaker of the sentence who is not explicitly mentioned. So, in the second sentence, the adjunct may at the first appear to modify the sun, the subject of the sentence. Presumably, there is another human subject who did reach the situation and observed the sun coming out, but this subject is not mentioned in the text. The intended meaning is obscured, and therefore this kind of sentence is incorrect in standard English. Now I saw the trailer peeking through the window. This is also an example. This means the speaker was peeking through the window, but the placement of the clause peeking through the window makes it sound as through the trailer were doing so. The sentence can be recast as, you can say, peeking through the window, I saw the trailer. Similarly, you can say she left the room fuming. It is convincingly the room rather than she that was fuming through. It is unlikely that anybody besides a fumigator would interpret it this way. Stunk and White describes as ludicrous another of this example. Unclear the concept. Stab at the ablative absolute. So, being in a dilapidated condition, I was able to buy the house very cheap. The author obviously meant the house was dilapidated, but the construction suggests that that speaker or writer identified I was dilapidated. So, these examples illustrate a writing principle that dangling participle violate. Follett state the principle. A principle at the head of a sentence automatically affixes itself to the subject of the following verb in effect to requirement that writer either make his grammatical subject consistent with the participle or discard the participle for some other construction. Stunk and White put it this way: a participle, the phrases at the beginning of a sentence, must refer to the grammatical subject. Dear student, dangling participles should not be confused with the clauses in absolute construction, which are considered grammatically, because the participle phrases in an absolute construction is not semantically attached to any single element in the sentence. It is easily confused with the dangling participle. So the difference is that a participle phrase is intended to modify a particular noun or pronoun, but is instead attached to a different noun, whereas an absolute clause is not intended to modify any noun at all. So non-participle modifiers that dangle can also be troublesome one. Now look at the example. After years of being lost under a pile of dust. So anyhow, in the case of this joke of the placement of the phrase called, another famous example of this humorous effect is Groucho Marx as Captain Joffrey. One morning I shoot an elephant in my how he get into my anyhow through under the most plausible interpretation of the first sentence. So I think so it's enough for explanation. So now look at here two notes about dangling modifiers. I was just discussing about the dangling modifiers to explains the thing. Unlike a misplaced modifier, a dangling modifier cannot be corrected by simply moving it to a different place in a sentence. In most cases, the dangling modifier appears at the beginning of the sentence. although it can also come at the end. Sometimes the dangling modifier error occurs because the sentences fails to specify anything to which the modifier can refer. So modifiers reflecting the mode or attitude of the speaker. This is very compulsory and important. Participle modifiers can sometimes be intended to describe the attitude or mode of the speaker. Obviously speaker is very compulsory and important. While if you are speaking, obviously speaker needs something. Even when the speaker is not a part of the sentence, some such modifiers are standard and are not considered dangling modifier. So speaking of any topic and trusting that this will put things into perspective, for example, are commonly used to transition from one topic to a related one, for adding a conclusion to a speech. So example 1 is here. Now we are looking dangling modifier. Looking toward the west, a funnel shaped cloud stirred up dust. So this sentence does not specify who is looking toward the west. Now look at the example again. Looking toward the west, there is no sense that as it is being said that who is looking toward the west. In fact, there is nothing at all in the sentence to which the modifying phrase looking toward the west can logically refer, since the modifier looking toward the west is sitting next to the funnel shaped cloud. The sentence suggests that the cloud is doing the looking. So example 2 is here. When 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. This is also dangling modifier. This sentence means that my mother enrolled in medical when she was 9-year-old, and at other time the dangling modifier is placed next to the wrong noun or noun substitute. Example number 1 is here. Walking to the movies, the cloud burst drenched Jim. So because of the placement of walking to the movies, this sentence suggests that the cloud burst is walking to the movies even through a possible walker. Jim is mentioned later. So this is the thing. In this example, Jim is mentioned at the end. Walking to the movies, the cloud burst drenched Jim. So because of placement of walking to the movies, this sentence suggests that the cloud burst is walking to the movies even through a possible walker. Now again repeating, Jim is mentioned later. So example 2 is here. Having been fixed the night before, Priscilla could use the car. So since having been fixed the night before is placed next to Priscilla, the sentence means that Priscilla was fixed the night before. As the above examples show, dangling modifiers result in inaccurate and sometimes statements. How to correct dangling modifiers? Now we have deal with the things that what are the modifier, what are the dangling modifiers. Now we have to look at how to correct dangling modifier. Dangling modifiers may be corrected in two general ways. So now correction method number 1 we have to look at here. Leave the modifiers as it is. Number 1, the correction method number 1, and now these are three are the subcategories of this method. Again I am repeating that how to correct dangling modifiers. So now correction method number 1 is here. So in this method there are three subcategories. Leave the modifier as it is. Change the main part of the sentences so that it begins with the term actually modified. This change will put the modifier next to the term it modifies. So before going further, I'll discuss a modifier describe or qualifies another part of a sentence. As earlier we have discussed that a dangling modifier occurs when the intended subject of the modifier is missing from the sentence and instead another subject appears in its place. So dangling modifiers often take the form of an introductory phrase that is connected to the wrong one. So now before recognizing dangling modifier in a correct sentence, the subject that is modified should immediately follow the comma after the modifier. In the as earlier example we have discussed the things. When a sentence does not clearly state the subject being modified, the introductory phrase becomes a dangling modifier. Dear students, I am repeating again the things for your understanding. Often this error is a result of a main clause written in the passive voice. So in as earlier in the example, the intended target of the modifier because a car accident appears where the subject should be. So the sentence now suggests. So I was just discussing that how to fix a dangling modifier. There are two simple ways to fix a dangling modifier. So method number one, as earlier I have discussed, the leave the modifier as it is. Change the main part of the sentence so that it begins with the term actually modified. This change will put the modifier next to the term modifier. So you can use the revise the main clause. So one method of fixing a dangling modifier is to leave the modifier as it is and rewrite the main clause so that it begins with the subject being modified. So now look at the example. This is the dangling modifier. Looking toward the west, a funnel shaped cloud stripped up dust. As earlier we have discussed this example, thus this dangling modifier may be corrected to looking toward the west, I saw a funnel shaped cloud stir up dust. Now you can look at this example. There is no I is being used here, but in this example we are using I. So now the sentence means that I was looking toward the west using the same method, this dangling modifier. Now look at the example. This example is being used earlier. Walking to the movies, the cloud burst drenched Jim. So this sentence may be corrected to walking to the movies, Jim was drenched by the cloud burst. So now the sentence means that Jim was drenched by cloudburst. So now we'll see the correction method 2. Another method of fixing a dangling modifier is to include the subject in the introductory phrase, leaving the main clause as it is. So change the dangling modifier phrase to a subordinate clause, creating a subject and a verb. Leave the rest of the sentence as it is. So now thus the dangling modifier is here. When 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. Dear student, these are the example. As earlier we have discussed in this lecture, but I am using that example again for your understanding that new example will be problematic for you people. For this I am using the repeating example. So now this sentence may be corrected to when I was 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. So now you can look, I is subject here and was is verb. So now the sentence means that I, not my mother, was 9 years old when my mother enrolled in medical school. So now look at here, when 9 years old, my mother enrolled in medical school. So now here it is, when I was 9 years old, my mother enrolled in school. So now this is the third statement. Now the sentence means that I, not my mother, was 9 year old. So he is telling that my mother was not 9 year old. I was 9 year old when my mother was being enrolled in medical school. So using the same method, the dangling modifier, having been fixed the night before, Priscilla could use the car. So maybe corrected to, since the car had been fixed the night before, Priscilla Cloud could use it. So now car is subject here, had been fixed is verb here. So now the sense is very clear between this and that sentence. I think so things are very clearly described for your understanding. I hope so you all will understand these things. So that's all, dear students. Inshallah, see you. Thank you.